According to Mrs. May's promise, repeated over 100 times, we ought now to have been outside the EU, eventually, at any rate, de jure, for a fortnight maybe. And leaving aside the details of all the dramas since the referendum, the reason is quite simple. Parliament, having voted overwhelmingly to accept the result of the referendum, is reverting to type and using every excuse and pretext to frustrate the clearly expressed view of the people, because quite simply, MPs are overwhelmingly Europhile and think they know better than we do what's good for us, and they're going to see that we get it. Before the referendum, the late Lord Ashdown expressed this total devotion to his view of British democracy. He said, "I will forgive no one who does not respect the sovereign voice of the British people once it has spoken. Whether it's a majority of 1% or 20%, when the British people have spoken, you do what they command. Either you believe in democracy or you don't." Well, after the result, he reverted from the British to the European attitude, as expressed by Jean-Claude Juncker, who said before the referendums in France and in the Netherlands, which rejected the EU constitution, if it's a yes, we will say on we go, and if it's a no, we will say we continue. And that's democracy EU style, which Mrs. May and Parliament are now slyly delivering to us. We should never underestimate the political will of the Europhiles. There's a German expression for this, der Wille zur Macht, the will to power, and nothing is allowed to stand in the way of it. Not truth, not common decency, and certainly nothing so quaint as the British idea of fairness, a word which incidentally doesn't exist in the German language. Now, I think you're well aware of the situation in Parliament where by MPs we had a result of 160 leavers against 486 remainers. So there's not much doubt this is the people versus the politicians. And we'll be looking forward today, from the standpoint of 50 years of CIB campaigning, to right the wrong which was done to us in 1972, when MPs who had not had a chance to read the terms of the accession treaty, in effect signed a blank cheque in favour of the European project, drawn against the balance in the Bank of Constitutional Freedoms accumulated by the British people over hundreds of years, substituting the will to power of an alien institution instead of our own laws, customs and usages. And one of our founders, who was in the thick of the debate in Parliament at the time, is with us today. He is Lord Stoddart of Swindon, who was our chairman for 23 years. And I thought, who better could I draw on for some wisdom to set the scene for us in the next stage of this struggle for our undoubted constitutional rights. Lord Stoddart, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's nice to be with you all this afternoon. We're still going strong, and it looks as though we'll have to go on further and be strong. But I saw a snippet in the news that Ian Duncan Smith, who was a great man, declared that his entire life as a politician has been a waste of time if Brexit is stopped. I know the feeling, because I made my first speech opposing our entry to the common market in 1962, when I was the prospective Labour candidate in the Newbury constituency, and it was made in the little village of Woolhampton. So I've been around this problem for a very, very long time, and it's about time I had a rest. That goes for the rest of us as well. But we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of our organisation this year. And it should be a day of triumph. It should be a day of joy. It should be a day of celebration. But unfortunately, that has been taken away from us by politicians who, as the chairman has said, think they know better than the people they are supposed to represent. And it is a complete and utter disgrace that our politicians should be resisting the people's will for self-government, because that's what it's all about. It's about self-government, that we want, we really want to go back 46 years to govern ourselves instead of being governed by a bunch of bureaucrats sitting in a foreign capital. So that's really what it's all about. I can't tell you what is going to happen in the future, because Mrs. May changes her mind, or is forced to change her mind by the EU, almost day by day. And again, as the chairman has said, she's said over 100 times, I think it is, that we would leave on the 29th of March. Well, I don't know when we're going to leave now. If Parliament has its way, I fear it'll be never. And that'll be a great shame. But it really is a disgrace that nearly 3 years after the referendum result, we are still shackled to the EU. Our country has so far been humiliated and betrayed by its incompetent Prime Minister and by a Parliament that seeks to believe that they are the servants of the people, not their masters. And they're now pushing for another referendum. What would that solve? Do they really think, these people, that if we have another referendum and it goes the other way, that people then say we must remain, do they really think that we're going to leave it at that? We'll need a third referendum. We'll need a third referendum so that we know what the people really want. And it is this refusal to accept what the people have said and to get on with it. However, if that does happen, I hate to think what will happen throughout the country. The British people are usually very understanding. They don't get mad at things, but I think once if Parliament, the government and Parliament, ignore them this time, there really will be trouble, and deservedly so, because I think the people's will must be granted, must be put in hand. And people generally can't understand why it is proving so difficult to leave the EU. Why, they say, are we still in after nearly 3 years when we voted to come out? And we voted in greater numbers than ever before. This really was a great test of the public, and they showed their intelligence by wanting self-government. And they can't understand why it is that we're not out by now. They can't understand, for example, why it is taking a deal. I don't like that word, deal. I would have preferred agreement. But the deal is there, over 500 pages and a political declaration, which the EU, our so-called partners, they're supposed to be our partners, refuses to amend in any circumstances. Whatever Mrs. May or Parliament or the people of this country say. It really is sickening to behold the spectacle of our Prime Minister going on bended knees to 27 countries, most of which wouldn't be in existence but for the bravery of the British people. Don't make any mistake about that, including Germany, who now, of course, seeks to dominate us. But as I say, but for this great stand of the British people against the rampaging Nazis, most of these countries wouldn't be there. Contrary to what some people, particularly people in Parliament who ought to know better, think, we are a great people. Just let's remind ourselves, it seems that we have to remind ourselves that we are a country of 65 million people. We're not just a little country, as some of these remaining people describe us. We have a big population of 65 million. Britain is the 5th largest economy in the world. The 5th largest economy in the world. We have 1,000 years of history behind us, most of which we can be proud of our history. We've given so much to the world, including democracy itself. It's quite true that the Greeks started it, but we built on it and, of course, have transferred it to the rest of the world. So we've been the saviour of Europe on so many occasions from the clutches of nasty dictators. So, and indeed the latest figures show that Britain is the most generous country in the world, the most generous country in the world in help to other nations less fortunate than ourselves. How is that for a record? I think we can be proud of ourselves. Yeah. That we can let's be proud to be British because of what we've done in the past, what we're doing at the present, and if we're allowed to, once we get out of the EEC, in the future as well. So our country is a country to be proud of, and frankly, it's sickening, absolutely sickening, to hear the campaign, the Remain campaign, belittling it and insulting the 7,400,000 people who voted for self-government. Because that's what they were doing, as I've already said. The British people were voting to govern themselves. So, what they're saying is that it is better to be governed by a bunch of bureaucrats sitting in a foreign capital rather than their own elected people sitting in Westminster and Whitehall. I find it amazing. I simply don't understand it. And it is Britain who should be dictating the terms of leaving, not the EU. You know, we're the ones that are leaving, and it's supposed to be a great democratic organisation, this EU, and it's taken us 3 years, and it'll take us a lot longer to get out of it. I mean, what sort of society, what sort of business, what sort of arrangement is that? They're not even satisfied with the 39 billion of money that our profligate government is prepared to hand over just to leave. I mean, really, you know, you usually have a joining fee, but you don't usually, when you leave an organisation, have a leaving fee as well. I mean, it is outrageous. And throughout my 49 years in Parliament, I have opposed the absorption of the UK into the European Union, and have done so in both Houses of Parliament, from both back and front benches. You've probably all forgotten, of course, that I was once a front bench spokesman for the Labour Party in the House of Lords, opposing the Maastricht Treaty. And incidentally, one of my companions in that was Margaret Thatcher. Oh yes, I thought you'd be interested in that. You know, they're trying to persuade us that Margaret Thatcher was a great European. I can assure you she wasn't. Because this is a bit of history, and I'm digressing, but when the Maastricht Treaty came before us, the government wanted to finish the whole of it in about 4 to 5 days. And we weren't having that. And Lord Pearson and I went to see the Chief Whip and said, we're not having it. And he believed us. Of course, there was absolutely nothing we could do about it. But we did say that we would keep the House going day and night to give the Maastricht Treaty bill a proper airing and decision-making. Anyway, we set up a committee because the Labour Party was useless. They had accepted virtually the Maastricht Treaty. So the front bench was supporting the government. So we set up an organisation of our own. We called it the Maastricht Study Group. I was the chairman of it, and Margaret Thatcher used to sit on my right hand. And she was a great contributor to it. And in fact, when we had the only vote, as a matter of fact, during the Maastricht Treaty, and that was for a referendum, she was in our lobby. So Margaret Thatcher became, quite true, probably in the beginning, she was in favour of it, but she came to understand how awful it was and how it was a danger to our very existence and democracy. I thought you perhaps might be interested in that, because that's a sort of working of Parliament that wouldn't be reported or on such thing. So let's get back to the speech. But during the debates we've had, and I think I have taken part in all the debates in both houses on all the new treaties. And during the debates on those treaties, we've always been told, when we've challenged, that it was challenged the government, that they were giving away our sovereignty, they've always replied, oh, we're not doing that because we can always repeal the European Communities Act 1972. Well, we have repealed it, and we're still in it. So they've been lying to us for all these years that it was a simple matter to get out. 500 pages, a political director, and in fact, we have already decided to come out. We've passed the bill, it's on the statute book, but we're still in it. And no sign of coming out if the government has anything to do with it. Now, Article 50. That was put in by Lord Kerr of Kinlochart. He's a good friend of mine. nice man, a clever man. And of course, everybody thought that Article 50 was the way out. But it's proved not to be way out. It is the trap. It was there as a trap to ensure that getting out was going to be difficult, if not impossible. Now, finally, we are being fed the same old lies from the establishment and the Remainer campaign that our economy will collapse, 5,000 jobs will be lost, prices will go up, inward investment out. We won't have any of that. And poverty will stalk the land. That's what they told us before the referendum. Exactly the same. Even the same figures from the Treasury. But it didn't happen. Instead of that, our country has thrived. You know, it's been growing every year. Wages have gone up. Prices have come down. Investment is coming in. So we're being told the same old story by the Remainers, who are desperate to ensure that we do not regain freedom to govern ourselves. So what can I say to you? I should be able to plot the way ahead. I just wish I could. Basically, it's easy. All we say is we're out. You know, that basically is, we're out, whether Parliament agrees or not. I don't know why Parliament has to agree to what the people have already decided. And Parliament should be facilitating that, not blocking it. And all I can say to you is thank you for your attendance here today, because it shows commitment. And for all you've been doing, those who've been members of this organisation, for so many years, for 50 years, which has played its part in keeping the issue alive. You know, that has been a great part to keep the issue alive until finally the British people have had enough and they have said, no, we don't want it any longer. We want our country back, and we will do all we possibly can to bring it back. Thank you for listening.
I thought I would cast just a few thoughts to you as to what has gone so badly wrong. And the first thought was something I forgot, although when referendums were being talked about back in 2011, I actually thought of this and obviously made no impression on my friends and forgot it completely myself. Because at the time I said, none of the proponents of an in-out referendum appears to have given any thought as to how the process of disengagement from the EU would be carried out if an outvote by the electors were achieved. But the government in power remained composed of old-style politicians who were reasonably comfortable with life under the EU and not committed to leaving it. Even with a firm political commitment by a majority of MPs, the degree of stubborn inertia in government departments and official bodies would be enormous. And what a pity that I forgot about that, and my colleagues didn't remember it either, because instead we relaxed after the referendum, rather like the victorious party in a general election, trusting the government to implement the referendum result, rather as a victorious party might be expected to carry out its manifesto commitment. Another real stumbling block, I think, was the massive arrogance of David Cameron in forbidding the civil service from making a plan B in the event of a leave vote. And I used to think that just indicated contempt for people like us. But I've since come to a slightly different conclusion, that it was at any rate in part because if serious planning had been done, it would have involved senior ministers, and they too would have become knowledgeable about the extent of the EU's control over our government. And I think that would have shocked them, leavers and remainers alike. And then Mr. Cameron made the grave mistake of getting President Obama to threaten us. And of course that really got our backs up, and what he'd said was that we would be at the back of the queue for preferential trade deals if we left the EU, because of course we do have a deal through the EU which gives access for many of our specialised products. Putting it in a little differently, Obama could have said, "You'll be on WTO terms at the back of the queue." But that's one thing which is now at last, thank goodness, gone right. And all credit to Dr. Liam Fox and his department, because we now have an agreement with the USA, thanks to Mr. Trump being rather more sympathetic than Mr. Obama, and it will come into force when we're independent. But I'm told, and I haven't checked it up, that agreements necessary to cover some 85% of our trade with countries other than the EU are still not yet complete, and they do need to be operational the second that we leave. Now, I'm cutting down on what I intended to say because I'm trying to save a few minutes per speaker so that we can have a little tea break later on. I had a message from Ambassador Leonidas Chrysanthopoulos from Greece. You may remember he addressed us in 2017, and he said, "I waited until today, March the 31st, before writing my message in the hope that the situation of UK exit would have cleared and that you would already have left the EU. But it was not to be. I still hope you will be able to make a clear exit during April, as I had also proposed in my speech to you at your annual general meeting of April the 29th, 2017. The clear unilateral exit of the EU will allow your country to become once more independent and masters of your own policies for the benefit of your people, and it will also inspire other member states to follow your example." He goes on with a few complimentary words for us. I had the honour of addressing a meeting of the Exodus organisation in Constitution Square in Athens in May last year, which was a very uplifting occasion, but I'm afraid we didn't quite get the revolution started.